In this video, I'm going to show you how to solve a quadratic equation using the quadratic formula. Now normally, if we can, we like to use the factoring method or the square root method if we can do that. But if that's not working, we can always fall back on the quadratic formula. In fact, the quadratic formula will work for any quadratic equation. Now notice what it says here. If a quadratic equation is in standard form, that's the ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, then x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Alright, so basically this is a formula that you can actually prove using a technique called completing the square. It's one that we won't be covering in this course, but you'll often see in a pre-calculus course, and you could actually look at the proof. It is in our book. But let's go ahead and get started. Let's look at number 12. I've already done this one here. So notice in this case a is 1, and b is 4, and c is negative 3. So if we have a subtraction, we do use the sign, the negative sign. And so you can see here I've written out the quadratic formula, and here I've plugged in my a, b, and c. So it's very important, first of all, that you know the quadratic formula, but step 2, make sure you're putting your numbers in correctly. By the way, one thing I should mention on this problem here is you always want your equation in standard form. On 12 and 13, these are in standard form, but that's always something you want to take care of first. Alright, so let me go down here, and you can see all I've done at this point is I've simplified everything that's in here. If you do that correctly, you get 28. And of course 2 times 1 is 2. So we've gotten pretty far here. We just have some simplifying to do. Now I want you to notice square root of 28 is not simplified. We could write that as the square root of 4 times the square root of 7. In other words, 4 is a perfect square factor, and so we need to factor or simplify it by taking care of that. And we get 2 square roots of 7. So basically I just rewrote square root of 28 in its simplified form, but I've also split up the expression into 2 fractions. We can write the negative 4 over 2 and the square root of 28, or its simplified form, 2 square root of 7 over 2. And then now we can simplify the whole expression because negative 4 over 2 is negative 2. Notice here our 2's cancel and we're left with just the square root of 7. So we get negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 7. Now most of the time we'll just leave our answer that way, but I just want to make sure that you're clear. This means there's 2 answers, negative 2 plus the square root of 7 and negative 2 minus, whoops, let me fix that, and negative 2 minus the square root of 7. So that would be the solution set for this problem. Let's move on to number 13. So here a is going to be 2, b is 3, and c is going to be negative 2. So let's go ahead and write out the quadratic formula. And again, I'm going to go ahead and make a shell. And by the way, I want to mention anytime you want to stop the video, you certainly, if you're trying to write all this down, you'll certainly want to do that. And you go at the speed that you want to go at. Let's see. So I'm going to go ahead and make a shell. So wherever you see a variable, now there's parentheses. And let's go ahead and plug in our a, b, and c. So I plugged in 3 for b, and 2 for a, and negative 2 for c. Again, you've got to make sure you're getting these in the right place. So we have a minus 3 plus or minus. Now let's look inside here. So we're going to simplify what's under the radical there. So 3 squared is 9 minus, remember we'll subtract last using the order of operations. We've got 4 times 2, which is 8, times negative 2, which is negative 16. So we're subtracting negative 16. You really got to be careful with your signs here. If you find yourself making mistakes, make sure you're checking these on your calculator, because your calculator is going to be able to do this. But there's no reason why you shouldn't get from here to here. This is going to be 25. 9 minus the negative 16 is 25. So we end up with negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 25 over 4. Of course, the square root of 25 is 5, so we're going to have x equals negative 3 plus or minus 5 over 4. So notice here, this is all numbers, and we can actually simplify this. This is not considered a simplified answer. So we have two answers here. X is negative 3 plus 5 over 4, which would be 2 over 4, or 1/2. And our other answer would be negative 3 minus 5 over 4. Let's see, negative 3 minus 5 is negative 8. So we get negative 8 over 4, which is negative 2. So our solution set is negative 2, 1/2. All right, let's move on to the next one. So notice this one is not in standard form. And so let's go ahead and add 13 to both sides. We get x squared plus 6x plus 13 equals 0. It's really important you do this, because if you had used c equaling negative 13, that would mess everything up. C is 13 here. So we got a is 1, b is 6, and c is 13. Let's go ahead and write down the quadratic formula. And let's make a shell. I'm going to go ahead and plug in all the numbers. And so now it's just a matter of simplifying. So we've got negative 6 plus or minus. Let's simplify this radical. We've got 36 minus 4 times 1 times 13 is 52. And 36 minus 52 is going to be negative 16. So this all simplifies to the square root of negative 16 over 2. Now we know the square root of 16 is 4, and since we have a negative under there, we're going to have an I. So this is just negative 6 plus or minus 4i over 2. So we actually are not done here. If you notice, I talked about how you can't just cancel like the negative 6 with the 2 here, because the negative 6 is a term. We can't cancel a term. Notice we have two terms here separated by a plus and a minus sign. So we can't cancel terms or part of a term, but what we can do is break this into two fractions. So this isn't simplified. We could write it as negative 6 over 2 plus 4i over 2, plus or minus 4i over 2, which is negative 3 plus or minus 2i. Now there is actually a shortcut. I said I couldn't cancel the 6 with the 2, but if you look at all three of these terms, the negative 6, the 4i, and the 2, they're all even. There's another way we can simplify this. Some of you may have already learned this. Just divide all the terms by their common factor, which is 2. So you're going to get negative 3 plus or minus 2i over 1. Just divided everything by 2. And notice that's the same as what we just got up above. All right, so you can take the shortcut or you can break it into two fractions, but you want to make sure you're simplifying your answers. Now if you look at number 4, you can see that I had to add or subtract 7 on both sides. I plugged in 3 for A, negative 5 for B, and negative 7 for C. When you simplify that, you should get 5, 6, plus or minus the square root of 109 over 6. So we have two answers here. I've written them out here. Now, it's important, when you look at these numbers, 5, 6, plus or minus the square root of 109 over 6, it's really hard to kind of wrap your mind around what that number is. And sometimes we may be doing word problems where we need a number that makes sense to us. So I would encourage you to put these expressions into your calculator and see if you're getting these two answers. This is a skill that you want to make sure you can do. You want to make sure you know how to use your calculator, and you certainly want to be able to simplify an expression like these. All right, so make sure you verify those, and that's going to be it for this video.